There are certain objects that carry a strange weight, an aura that feels out of place in the most innocent of settings. Paintings, dolls, antiques, things many dismiss as mere trinkets or decorations. I once thought such warnings were nothing more than outdated superstitions, relics from a time when people feared the unknown far more than reality. For years I laughed off these stories, rolling my eyes at the idea of cursed objects or haunted trinkets. But now I know better. I've learned the hard way that those warnings weren't simply stories meant to entertain or scare. They were real. It all began during a family vacation to a foreign country, a place renowned for its rich history, folklore, and, as I would come to understand, its mysteries. The locals spoke in hushed tones about ancient curses, dark magic, and spirits bound to objects left behind by the dead. My parents had chosen this destination for its mysterious allure, hoping it would provide an educational and cultural experience. I, on the other hand, had thought of it as another way to pass the summer, a diversion before the monotony of school resumed. The town we stayed in was like something out of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Winding cobblestone streets crisscrossed between buildings that looked as if they'd been standing for centuries, their weathered facades bearing scars of time. Shadows gathered thickly in every corner, clinging to the cracks and crevices of the ancient walls. The air was heavy and oppressive, carrying an unnatural stillness that seemed to follow us wherever we went. It was the kind of place that made you feel as though you were being watched, though you'd find no one when you turned around. During one of our explorations, we stumbled upon a shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of the town. Its faded wooden sign swung lazily above the entrance, the lettering so worn it was barely legible. The windows were fogged with years of dust and grime, concealing the treasures or oddities within. Something about the place drew me in, like a whisper at the back of my mind urging me to enter. My parents, distracted by a nearby market, didn't notice when I slipped inside. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping into another world. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged wood, dust, and something metallic that left a faint tang at the back of my throat. The dim lighting revealed shelves crammed with an assortment of peculiar items. Jars filled with preserved plants lined one wall, their contents suspended in murky liquid that distorted their shapes into grotesque forms. Ornate boxes with cryptic engravings sat stacked haphazardly, as if daring someone to open them. Statuettes carved from bone and stone peered down from high shelves, their hollow eyes seeming to follow my every move. But it was the paintings that truly captivated me. They hung on the far wall, an assortment of canvases ranging from vibrant landscapes to unsettling portraits. Each one was crafted with such exquisite detail that they seemed almost alive. The colors were unnervingly vivid, practically glowing in the dim light, and the brush strokes were so fine they disappeared into the images, giving them an otherworldly realism. Among them, one painting stood out above the rest. It depicted a young woman with long black hair cascading over her pale shoulders like a waterfall of ink. Her expression was serene, yet deeply unsettling, as though she held secrets too terrible to share. But it was her eyes that held me captive. Dark and haunting, they seemed to pierce through me, locking onto mine no matter where I moved. It wasn't just the artistry that made them so lifelike. It was something more. Something that felt alive. "The one's not for sale," a voice rasped behind me, making me jump. The shopkeeper had appeared from the shadows, his face as weathered as the shop itself. His gaze was firm, almost fearful, as he looked at the painting. "You're better off leaving it be." I should have listened. Every instinct told me to walk away, to leave the shop and never look back. But I couldn't. The painting had an inexplicable pull, a magnetic force that I couldn't resist. "How much?" I asked, ignoring the warning in his tone. He hesitated, then named a price so low it seemed absurd. It was as if he wanted it gone but didn't want to bear the responsibility of destroying it. Without thinking, I handed over the money and left the shop, clutching the painting like a prized possession. Looking back, I wonder if the shopkeeper knew what he had condemned me to. When we returned home, I hung the painting on the wall of my bedroom. Its vivid colors stood out starkly against the plain walls, drawing my gaze every time I entered the room. But from the very first night, I noticed something was off. The air in my room felt heavier, thicker, as though the painting had altered the very atmosphere. I dismissed it as jet lag or exhaustion, but the feeling didn't go away. Then came the whispers. They started faintly, barely audible over the hum of the night. At first I thought they were tricks of my imagination, but they grew louder with each passing night. I'd wake to the sound of murmurs, too soft to make out, but persistent enough to keep me from falling back asleep. Whenever I turned on the lights, the whispers would stop, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence. The dreams began soon after. In them, the woman from the painting would stand in an empty room, her dark eyes locked onto mine. She never spoke, never moved, but her gaze was suffocating. As the nights went on, the dreams grew darker. She'd inch closer with every dream, her serene expression giving way to something far more sinister. I'd wake drenched in sweat, her haunting image burned into my mind. One night I woke to find the painting no longer on the wall. My heart raced as I scanned the room, only to find it propped up against the far corner, facing my bed. My parents insisted they hadn't touched it, and I knew I hadn't moved it. I hung it back up, convincing myself it must have fallen somehow. But the pattern repeated. Night after night, I'd wake to find the painting in a different spot. Sometimes it would be leaning against a wall, other times it would be lying on the floor. Once, I even found it on the other side of the house. My family swore they had nothing to do with it, but the tension in the house grew palpable. Then, things escalated. One night as I lay in bed, I felt a presence in the room. The darkness felt alive, oppressive, and I could sense someone watching me. My breath hitched as I turned toward the painting. Her eyes seemed brighter, almost glowing in the dim light. And then she moved. It was just a slight tilt of her head, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. The whispers grew louder after that. No longer confined to the nights, they followed me during the day, faint murmurs just beyond the edge of hearing. Objects in my room began to shift on their own, small movements at first, then more noticeable changes. My once safe haven had become a prison, and the painting was its warden. Desperation drove me to seek help. I burned sage, hung protective charms, and even consulted a local priest. Nothing worked. The painting remained, its presence an oppressive weight on my soul. Finally, my parents and I agreed it had to go. We drove far out into the countryside, carrying the painting to a secluded clearing. I leaned it against a tree and walked away, my steps quickening with every passing moment. That night, I dreamed of her again. She stood in the clearing where we'd left the painting, her serene expression replaced by something far darker. Her lips parted, and though no sound came, I woke with a scream lodged in my throat. In the weeks that followed, life seemed to return to normal. The heavy atmosphere that had once suffocated our home lifted, and the whispers that had tormented us faded into silence. But occasionally, a chill would sweep over me, an inexplicable sensation that someone was watching, lingering just beyond my sight. On quiet nights, when the wind rustled the trees, I could swear I heard faint whispers on the breeze, like remnants of something dark still lingering. I often wondered what became of the painting. Perhaps it was hidden away, forgotten, or maybe it found its way into the hands of another, someone unable to resist its pull. But I knew one thing for certain. The woman in that painting wasn't merely an image. She was something much older, much darker, a curse trapped within the frame. If you ever come across a painting of a pale woman with haunting eyes, no matter how beautiful it seems, walk away. Do not be drawn in by her gaze. The allure is deceiving, and the consequences are real. Some things are not meant to be possessed, and some things once touched will possess you instead. Be wary. for the painting's curse may never truly fade.
Moral of the story is, dabbling in black magic brings more harm than power. Beware of the darkness you summon.